The world is saved. The living room's dark save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions. How's it going?
It's good. I appreciate you coming to the recording in your Professor X cosplay. That's nice. That's thoughtful of you.
No, it's pretty good. I've actually been getting really into it, so much so that I wear it every day.
Just all the time. It's not a costume
because
anymore.
it's not Professor X cosplay, because then I'd have to do those insane eyebrows that he has.
He did have insane eyebrows.
He did, man. Like those super intense eyebrows where it's just kind of like, is that what you created the school for gifted youngsters? Because he's like, look, man, my eyebrows are my eyebrows, and I've accepted it, but you need to leave me alone about it.
Yeah, that's why he hung out with Beast. He's like, I'll look normal next to this weirdo.
when you're next to a 500-pound giant pink or giant blue beast, people can care less about your eyebrow situation. Yeah, no, that's legit.
He would have been even more distracting if he'd been pink. So we played X-Men. We played the Genesis X-Men. And before we talk about the game at all, I want to go on a rare pre-show tangent.
Go on.
And I thought about actually bringing this up with you in the pre-show, but I was like, nah, I want him to come into this cold. So,
Sweet. Excellent.
Yeah. So, we played this game, and there's like a theme with the show you may have noticed around nostalgia, right? So, I was like, oh, I kind of want to listen to the 90s X-Men cartoon theme. So, I was sitting on the couch with Susan, and I was like, hey, grab your Chromebook and look up the X-Men cartoon opening. And she was like, yes, okay. So
yes, yes.
Yeah, so that kind of led us down a rabbit hole for about 20 minutes of like, ooh, now we'll watch this one. Ooh, now we'll watch that one. And two crazy left turns, because you can't, if you're in an unfamiliar city, you're going to go down some bad streets, right? So
sure.
Two unpleasant turns happened. One is I'd never watched the Fantastic Four cartoon. Yeah, I didn't even, I kind of knew it was a thing, but gun to my head, it probably would not have been on my list of shows that existed.
I think that Fantastic Four is an interesting exemplar of being literally the backbone of the Marvel universe. It is one of their big premier IPs, and nothing outside of the comic itself has ever had any value whatsoever.
Yeah, it's shocking in a strange way, but some stuff does, they keep giving it bad writers, they keep giving it bad, showrunners or movie people, it's gonna, you're gonna end up with garbage, but you're never gonna end up with garbage quite as hot as the opening to the 90s cartoon. It's so unbelievable that during the viewing, I kind of turned to Susan you screwing with me? There's no way this is really it. And she was just like, yeah. So then that reminded me of, do you remember the X-Men opening to the movie they did in the late 90s where they all had the brown costumes?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So this is where, while I'm mixing this episode, I will actually insert a clip from that theme so people can hear it, because it's that unbelievable. X-Men. But it's one of those that, I was like, oh, was there a different cartoon, or maybe it was this other thing? And so then I found it. It's actually from Pride of the X-Men, as in Kitty Pryde, Pryde, and it's, it was a self-contained movie, but it just has this insane opening theme. And I was just like, man, that's such a dramatic range, because obviously we're going to talk about the music in the game, but there's this huge unreal range of the 90s Fox cartoon was so good. That opening theme is just so good. Like, it's even good now, like as an adult 25 years later. And then this other one was so bad. It's so campy and terrible. Like, you would never believe that the terrible one came out later, like when they were already riding high. Like, they got too self-confident,
They're like,
too cocaine crazy. They were fueled by their success, and they crashed and burned. Very Icarus.
I'm a little frustrated because I was literally going to say, like, they wrote they like Icarus with his wax wings flew too close to the sun with their cocaine wings, you know. But you got the cocaine reference first, man. Good on you.
Yeah. So it was bound to happen sooner or later.
Yes. Yeah, no, and actually just to touch on it, because we'll obviously touch on it more during that formal section, but literally one of my notes is the intro music is so terrible. Why didn't they use the music from the show? You know, like, but we'll get there. What's your nostalgia experience for this game, if any?
So this was no question a Blockbuster rental. I can almost picture the shelf on Blockbuster this game was at, because it was like, since it's, an X title, it was like between two sections. So there's like the, Super Nintendo section and the Nintendo section and the Genesis section, Game Boy section, like that. And it was like right, near the end of the Genesis section. And I don't think I rented this game like 1,000 times. Like, it was definitely like, yeah, I rented that a few times, but it was, I think of all the games we've played, this had the biggest departure between my lived experience and my nostalgia experience, in good and bad ways, because a deep down part of me just decided to lump all X-Men games together. And a lot of the things I was picturing in my mind were the arcade game, which this is super not. And I knew it wasn't, but like, I could not disentangle those things in my mind until I like sat down with my notepad and I was like ready to critique. And then the game started and I was like, oh, that visual of Magneto is pretty cool. And then I actually started playing and I was like, oh, right. This is in no way the arcade game.
But yeah, no, for me, this was one that my friend Justin, like, he owns this one. And so it was one that, like, we would go over and play. And I definitely remember it feeling bigger, just because, like, we would go over there and play it. And because it's not the easiest game ever.
Nope.
So, like, we'd play it and we'd be like, oh my God, like, we are the X-Men, and like, oh, and you can be Gambit or Nightcrawler or Wolverine, and you can call upon Storm. This game has so much to offer, but then now that like, when I played it this time, I was like, did we ever even get past the second stage? Or were we just like losing our minds so hard about like being the X-Men that we would play it for 15 minutes, throw it down, and then they're like, I'm Wolverine, I'm Cyclops, and just beat the snot out of each other and stop playing the game.
That feels pretty like believable and oddly relatable, because I'm pretty confident that there were times I probably played old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games and was like, I don't even care how hard this is because I'm going to go run around in my backyard like an idiot. And like, just completely, like, I got what I needed out of it, right? It's like the difference between people who want, like a froofy, like, almond milk vanilla latte, which I'm one of these people, by the way, and someone who takes, like, a granola bar that's laced with caffeine. And it's like, that person doesn't want to enjoy a caffeinated beverage. They just want to be amped up. And like, I can totally imagine, 7 through 12-year-olds sitting down to X-Men just to get like all X-Men'd up before they go play X-Men.
Yeah, before they go be the X-Men. Yeah, no, I'm really like as I was playing, I was really just starting to think. I think this was a means to an end, not an experience in and of itself, Yeah,
no, I'm totally with you. But we should, at the very least, pick it apart. So there were visuals in this game, like most games. Oh, man. Yes. Someday we should try and find a game with absolutely no visuals. Anyway, right now you're kind of like, But the graphics in this game are, they are art pieces in that there are very few assets that in a static setting I would point to and say I didn't like. But then when you have to like play the game and like interact with the world and you see things moving and it falls apart fast.
Yeah, I think that this one is interesting in the sense that, and so with all of the games that we do, sometimes I'll recognize something, I'll be like, oh, this is something that I didn't care for, and then immediately think, well, wait, did other games do this? And the only excuse that I have for that is A, I'm human, and B is that even if this is an issue in other games, it must not have been so bad of an issue that like I didn't have attention called to it then, or it was not anywhere close to the worst issue. Like other games also had this problem, but they had so many other problems that it was like, just in there somewhere, which is that I think it's, if you, like you said, like if you see, Wolverine, right? And they showed like his walking animation, jumping animation, all sorts of stuff. You'd be like, yeah, no, all that looks good. But then the way that he walks and jumps and or other sort of stuff, and then when anything else is moving, none of it comes together well, in the sense that like it feels really stilted somehow,
Yeah, a lot of the animations, I was like, oh, that animation had like 4 keyframes. It probably should have had like 6, because parts of things would be very smooth, and then there would be a frame. Like Wolverine's a good example when he's all snicked and his claws are out, and you do like his jump attack. He like lunges down at an angle, right? But he goes from that position, like a very long horizontal, leg out behind him, arm out in front of him, to standing straight up with his arms down at his side in like 1 frame. And it's it's like super jarring because it doesn't look like he moved into that position. It just looks like you blinked at the wrong time, and then you suddenly realize like, well, I can't always be blinking at the wrong time.
Yeah. And then like, so that'll happen. And then all of a sudden, that'll happen. And then it's like one of the cave people will, throw something or whatever they are, the multi-armed Savage Land bad guy sprite.
The gyms.
Yeah. Okay. They will throw something at you, and so then that animation and you may actually know more about it than I do, because I think that this system is one where like basically, so let's say you're doing that downward slash with Wolverine, the background and foreground will like move relative to one another.
Yeah, it's called parallax.
Excellent. So I'm learning stuff. So that'll happen, but when that happens in response to you like shooting down off the screen while something is moving perfectly linear, all of that just it's very like cognitively dissonant, because I think your brain just says, no, where exactly am I viewing this from that all of this this exact angle played out like this? And it just feels weird. It's not the end of the world, but it's constantly like the little thing in the back of your brain going like, hey, that's not the way reality works,
Yeah, and there are certain levels where there's a lot more exposed distant background, and then in other levels there's almost zero exposed distant background, so that effect isn't even consistent. It's not like, oh, well, you'll get used to it eventually. It's like, no, it kind of comes and goes depending on what shape the world is taking right now, which makes it harder to adjust to.
So I'm going to take my first tangent for the...
By the way, I absolutely should have called them the Avatar people, the Na'vi, and I'm sorry that I missed that opportunity, but from henceforth, they are the Na'vi.
They are the Na'vi? That distinctly changes the narrative of Wolverine.
Wait a minute, you guys. Are we the bad guys?
He says like claws covered in blood. Like, wait, do heroes do this? But no. So one of the things that I've been doing some reading and research on recently is and I am by no means an expert on it. I am still very much so in the middle of learning this, but is the 8 different types of intelligences. Are you familiar with this at all?
I mean, yes, obviously, but for the listener's sake.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, for the listeners, is so for a while, obviously we've all heard of IQ, right?
Right.
Right. And IQ has been wildly kind of poked at to be not really a great way to measure intelligence, right?
Well, and the way the popular culture sees on it isn't even right. So it's the science is and then the way the popular culture grabbed onto it is just wrong, so it's even worse.
Yeah, it was like taking a interesting concept that they were using to kind of kludge an idea and then turning it into racism. So, anyway, so they decided that was not the way to go, and so what the new theory, the new hotness is that there are actually 8 different intelligences, and it's very specific brain processes that that work in and of themselves, and your brain talking between those different types of intelligences is reasoning, right? So and so basically it's each one of those intelligences is its own language, and them talking to each other, the translation between those 2 or 5 intelligences that you'll be using at the same time is your ability to reason, right? And one of them is spatial, right? So it's your ability to look at a thing. And the example that was given to me, I thought was very good. It's if you look at a cabinet and then you were to draw that cabinet, you'd be using spatial reasoning spatial intelligence, because you're taking a 3-dimensional object and you're placing it in 2 dimensions, right? And so weird stuff like the all of Escher's stuff kind of play around with that kind of thing. And this is where I, to bring it back to the video game, is the intelligence that I think was constantly raising its hand in the class and being something's wrong, and I just couldn't quite ignore it, where I was just kind of yeah, no, that's not all of the experience, all the intelligence that I've built in this area is telling me that there's something spatially off here, and I just couldn't quite pin it down.
Well, and this, in a far less intelligent sounding way, this is a problem I had throughout, which is I was never totally sure which plane I was on whenever there was more than one plane available, because the visual might change, but then the game would respond as if I was still in the foreground. And then other times it was oh, but now you're in the background. And I was I'm
yeah.
And it's it's the way I was thinking of it, it was this is affecting my ability to problem solve, because I'm looking at the world and I'm can I walk behind that? Am I supposed to walk behind that? Is walking behind that even a thing I should be giving consideration to? My first playthrough, because I got, several sessions in, my first playthrough, I spent an almost embarrassingly long amount of time not realizing I could walk behind the waterfall. Because I was just well, I've walked behind a few trees, but every other time I've been near water, it hasn't really been what am I supposed to do here? And where do I go? And there's lots of little gaps in the cliffside where you have to jump over them, even though they're tiny, because they're trying to trip you up because they're jerks. And And I was well, I don't want to get too close to the waterfall, because what if I just plummet to my death? So I probably spent realistically 3 to 5 minutes just being I don't know what to do. I guess I'll try and jump or something. And then I did a half jump and walked right behind it. And I was oh. And that gets even more egregious in the second level, the spaceship. Whose spaceship is that?
Shi'ar.
Them.
Duh, dumbass.
Because when you're on Ridley Scott's ship, it's there's a bunch of doors and stuff.
Ridley Scott's gonna sue somebody.
there's a bunch of doors and things you have to go through, and you have to awkwardly jump or drop to go through those doors. and it's not only are the controls kind of clunky to make it happen, because sometimes you need to do it like sort of quickly, but there aren't really good visual indicators that that's a thing I even need to be thinking about. So
Right.
to tie my comment back to yours, it's almost like I am looking at a picture of a cabinet and I'm like, there's got to be some way to open this. I mean, it looks like a flat picture, but I need to put all these dishes somewhere. So I'm just like, I'm like fumbling at this drawing like an idiot because it's 3-dimensional, but I'm only seeing it in 2 dimensions. And it was just, I mean, you could argue like, it's bad design, like it's bad graphics, like there's ways they could have created depth. And I think those things are true, like no question. The design issue that I think is being surfaced is that they have different cues that are used in different places and they're inconsistent. So you can't just learn, oh, wherever parallax is happening, that means you can go behind a thing. Or, oh, wherever there's a shadow, that means you can go in front of the thing. Or, oh, wherever X, then Y. Like, there's no consistency in that. So whether or not any of those design choices would have been the right one, we'll never know because they just used all of them.
Yeah, no, they kind of barrage you because and on the Shi'ar ship, I've noticed that, and this is just a general human failing of my own, is that once, and we've discussed this with movies in particular, where I will take like between 2 to 7 fourth wall breaks before I completely abandon like the thing. And now I just like where I just get to the point where I'm like, you know what, I'm just looking for problems now. I am not in the moment anymore. And this really started to get there where I felt like and I know that when I'm starting to get to this point with a game, it doesn't, I should stay dispassionate so we can do a proper scientific review. But I noticed that when I get to a particular emotional state where I'm like, this is indicative of not the best game, which is like, explain to me exactly why I should give a damn about any of this, you know? Like, which is, so like and on the Shi'ar ship was when I started to get there because it was just kind of like, okay, well, I need to go behind this thing. No, wait, in front of this thing. And apparently I need to take a knee and then slam my knee so hard into the ground that I move forward a little bit. Mm-hmm. And like, okay, all right, that's fine. But the bad guy can still hit me. Okay, well, that's cool. But now I'm going to go behind the thing. Can he hit me when I'm behind the thing? No, he can't hit me when I'm behind the thing. But he can hit me when I'm one like row up, but still in the foreground. And I was just kind of like, oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, so
yeah. No, I'm right there with you. And the only saving grace for it was I played, I don't know, let's say 5 sessions of this, like to make sure I'd done as much research as I could. And total, it was actually more time than I thought because I've been busy with work stuff, and I know you're busy with work stuff, so like it worked out fine. I started to make my peace with it when I realized the BS was consistent enough that as long as I was willing to memorize the rules, I wouldn't get cheated. So like when you realize, okay, on this kind of, when there's a mesh in front of you and you're behind it, no one in the foreground can hit you. And if there's an open door and you're standing in the doorway, but you haven't jumped up into the background, then they can hit you, right? Like it was annoying, and I didn't always agree with the outcome of my experiments, but they were, as far as I could tell, completely consistent. So,
well, sorry,
no, go ahead.
What I was going to say is, and this actually speaks back to the thing. And sorry, like I said, I've been kind of elbow deep in researching this, so I'm going to probably bring it up 3 or 4 more times. Which is to say that so what's happening there is and please, if any of our listeners are way more familiar with this theory than I am, be gentle.
Yeah. Go outside your house.
Yeah. That is a multi-episode callback.
It's really funny.
But anyways, is so basically the ideal intelligence to use for that is spatial reasoning, right? Because the problem is that they are being so super inconsistent that intelligence doesn't really know how to do with that. So you are actually kludging different intelligences in order to make up for it. So basically what you're using is, and there may be a better one, but like closer like mathematical logical, where you're just kind of like, your brain is coming up with these discrete rules and you're just memorizing them at this point, Yeah. And so, like you're like, okay, if A, then B, if B, then C. And so that's the part of your mind that you are now throwing at this problem, because it's not it is not allowing you to leverage the part of your mind that you should be to solve this problem.
Which almost makes it like like an optical illusion, where it's like, okay, I know that these two grays are the same gray, but my brain refuses to believe it. But I need to know it. Like, I know these two grays are the same gray, but my eyes are lying to me because brains are dumb. Like brains are dumb in this particular way. And that's, it doesn't make for like a super exciting experience, but it changes the gameplay in an interesting way. And I don't want to diverge too much from the visuals, but like, it changes the gameplay in an interesting way, because now it's almost like a memory game, or like a Simon style game, because I would get to a certain part of the level, because I died a lot. I would get to a certain part of the level and I would be like, okay, jump here, do this, duck down, shoot that guy in the knee, he explodes, haha, jump over here, now I'm in the background, so that guy can't hit me, so I don't have to worry about him. Like, I was like, I don't want to memorize this game like I'm going for the world record speed run, but it's the only way I can interact with this environment without clawing my eyes out. Like, it was
right.
And I don't think that's not sustainable. Like, I wouldn't want to do that any more than I had to, but it was a tolerable workaround for this problem in this instance.
Yes. And actually, I think that this is something that I start thinking of with video games, is perhaps one of the problems that we have is not what intelligence the game is pulling from, because the awesome thing about games and education is that you can kind of use them to work on all of them, and different ones. That's the flexibility of that. Whereas if you say, hey, we need you to memorize all this stuff by rote, it's like you're really only driving one intelligence, no matter which thing you're learning, Yeah,
if you're memorizing music or Shakespeare or math, you're just memorizing it.
Yeah, you're just memorizing. But all of that being said, is the frustration comes when the game is unclear which one you're supposed to be using. So, for example, Uniracers, which we played a while back, but like one of the things that I was frustrated with was I was like, the game moves too fast for me to improvise. And so, but the game wants you to memorize it, like it wants you to, and we played a couple of games where we've said the only way to beat this game is to memorize by rote, like the way to play it. And it's like, well, and those games can be very interesting and not frustrating, but they're not frustrating when they do a good job telegraphing that is what you're supposed to be doing, as opposed to you spending quite some time desperately trying to fit a square peg into a round hole until all of a sudden you're like, ugh. And you put the square peg down and you go rummage in your closet and you get the round peg and you shove it in there. Like that's where the frustration comes from, is when you're trying to play the game in a way it's not supposed to be played.
And I wouldn't say it's necessarily the designer's fault, but when I show up to an action platformer, I am not thinking rote memorization. Like,
right.
I'm just not. And I don't believe most people are. Like, when most people sit down to play, I mean, like Mario or Sonic, right? The quintessential platformers. I don't think those people are like, oh, I can't play this game. I don't have World 1-1 memorized anymore. It's like, no, but you'll figure it out. Like or Mega Man's probably the best example, right? So much teaching through level design. Like, you're never going to memorize those levels unless you're going for a world record speed run. Like, you do what you need to do when you need to do it. But so much of particularly the second level, I was just like, okay, I guess this is the door. I have to do the thing that my brain is like, why are you doing that? And it was just consistently like kind of disheartening in a way. Yeah. But once I forced myself into the memorization pattern, the thing that became satisfying about that is lasering people in their kneecaps and watching them explode. So I found my joy. It just did not come from where I expected.
And I'm super glad that you bring up Cyclops' laser, because I have two other notes in visuals, and they both revolve around Cyclops. One is like Cyclops' laser, in the sense that this is now, I believe, not the second consecutive, but the second in quick succession, where I'm like, I now really want to know at what point in video game visual design we became able to do lasers right. Because I swear to God, if I see one more dumb Tic Tac goes flying across the level and lackadaisically like slam into my opponent. I'm like, that's not what lasers look like. This looks weird.
See, that's another good callback.
But yeah, no, I mean, I was just like, I fired a laser and I was just kind of like, yeah. I mean, so I want to know at what point, the laser animation got out of bed and said, you know what, I'm done being a red Tic Tac. It's time to wear my big boy pants today, and became an actual good laser animation.
Do you know for sure that happened? Like, have you seen the other side of the valley and now you just want to know where the valley is? Or do you just believe that there's another side to the valley?
Oh, I mean, because there are tons of video games now where, lasers, I think, are handled very well, know?
Okay, I was just making sure.
But I mean, like, the ones that come to mind are like Mass Effect. And I'm sure that there's somewhere between, Toy Story, the SNES video game, and Mass Effect 3, where they,
Maybe that's why that game was successful. They were like, finally, we finally nailed it.
So all of that, and man, I wish I had 1/10 of the confidence that Cyclops has with his walk animation. Dude struts. Like he basically does the remember back in college when we do the like pounding the fist walk?
Yeah.
You know? That is Cyclops all the time. Like, he's just walking around, like just basically punching into the air directly below his waist, like as he walks every time. Like, oh yes, I'm going to go home and I am going to have all of the sex with Jean Grey. Like, that is what I'm doing with my afternoon. What are you doing with yours? Anything else? Too bad. Like.
Yeah. No, I actually have in my notes. Lol at all the goofy marching walks everyone does, because it's indisputable that Cyclops is definitely trying to compensate for something with that walk, and that's fine. I'm not judging him. I hope he gets the self-confidence he deserves. He's a leader. He's a strong mutant. He doesn't need to put on airs. But
apparently he does need to put on spandex, but we digress.
I assume that was Professor Xavier's doing. He was like, yes, you all need to wear these skin-tight costumes. Maybe
that's why he's strutting, because it's the only way he can, wear that stuff and not feel stupid. He's like, man, I gotta go to town with that, because,
gotta own
Professor Xavier's just kind of like, listen, you have a brilliant tactical mind. You have a beam of light that can shoot from your eyes. That it is important that we teach you to learn how to hone, focus, and train, so you don't only are not a danger to yourself and others, but you can leverage that to be a mutant that can help save mankind. I need you to wear this purple lycra spandex suit.
What was that last part? Yeah, so... I mean, does he have the dumbest costume? Let's not get into that.
4 hours later.
So Wolverine has, you know what? There's almost like an evolution of man thing going on, because Nightcrawler is like down and all hunched. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he actually puts his hands on the floor when he walks, but like they're close. He's like very horizontal. Wolverine is like kind of shoulders forward. Like, he's a little like he's if you've ever seen a movie where like the bad guy is coming and like, oh man, like he's coming, like he's gonna beat the crap out of us or he's gonna kill me or something, like he's like that. Like, he's kind of animalistic. I mean, it's very Wolverine, right? He's like shoulders forward, bent awkwardly forward at the waist.
I mean,
Gambit, it kind of has like a more natural walk. He probably walks like the most normal. And then Cyclops is like, no, I walk the most normal. Look at how normal my walk is. You're like, ooh, tone it down there, Blue Man.
I think the reason why Wolverine walks like kind of like hunched forward at an angle is because he's just kind of a little bummed, because he knows that eventually his story ends with him holding his heart in his hands.
Hate you.
No, it's fine.
Let's just go on. God, the movie's so good.
It's so good. It's so. If you haven't watched Logan yet, get your life to quit your job, leave your family, go watch Logan.
Take the members of your family with you that will watch it, and if they put up any resistance, they're dead to you forever. So,
they're gone.
So the thing that bothered me is not just the postures, because I kind of think it's nice that they have different like walk animations, because they did a good job of making each character feel different when you played them and look different and move different and everything. They all walk at a speed so frustratingly slow.
It's true.
And it is definitely the most pronounced with Cyclops, because he's just like, I have places to be. And it's like, yeah, why don't you run there then?
Why don't you get there at a speed slightly faster than a slow saunter?
Yeah, why are you power walking everywhere? Are you retired, Cyclops? Like, is this how you keep fit? You put on your little swim goggles and you go for a power walk on a humid morning, sweat out some of the toxins of a life lived as a mutant. Like, get where you're going. This is important.
This is important. No, he's just hourly. He's just like, look, man, I'm getting paid by the hour, and oh man, I got to get from point A to point B, and I gotta feed my kids. So, I got to feed my weird future child who has a robotic arm and a strange eye. He's got a lot of medical issues.
Hold your fire. That escape pod is empty. Hold your fire. What are we paying by the laser now?
You don't do the budget, do you, Tim?
Yeah. No. Anyway, so that's pretty much my feelings on the graphics. Is that the environments and the characters all look great in isolation, and then playing them as a game is super janky. Okay, so
I hated the sound so much. I hated it. Like, the visual's fine. I mean, like you said, like you can poke at them, and there's some stuff to poke at, But I mean, honestly, whatever. But the sound,
I'm overwhelmed with delight that anyone who uses the chapter markers in the episodes, like, that's the opening to this chapter.
Yeah, the people were like, man, I don't really. I just want to listen about the audio this time. I hated it. No, it was.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. Like, it's shockingly bad.
It is. It's kind of a masterclass in bad, because first of all, to be fair, they do kind of telegraph right off the bat, like, hey, here's the thing, man. Decisions needed to be made, and we made the wrong one right off the bat. Brace up, because we didn't start making good ones later.
Well, and I think it's important to divide up the music and the sound effects, right? Because we normally do that, but the music is very 90s comic book action cartoon. Like, it's very inoffensive. It's actually, in some spots, it's even pretty okay, but it's very Genesis instrument set, 90s style music. And I have nothing else to say about it, because, oh my God, the sound effects.
The sound effects are so terrible. The only thing I have to say about the music is something that we alluded to before, which was, I was like, I queued it up and I was like, yeah, man, here we go. I'm ready for. Nope, I was like, yes. And it was like weird, not that music. And I was like, why would it ever not be that music? I was like,
wait a minute.
It's fine.
This isn't the arcade game or the cartoon.
This isn't the arcade game at all. But yeah. So anyway, but I press play, got through that, and then it was all downhill from there, because, oh my God. So where do you want to start? You want to start with the noise that pterodactyls make, and you listen to that noise and tell me there's a God, like, it's just, why does that happen? It's just so screechingly awfully loud. It's almost as bad as the death sound effect from Golden Axe,
Ooh, yeah. It's a lot like that.
Yeah, it's not like that level of horribly offensive.
Well, the thing that I mostly felt about the sound effects that were so frustrating is how, like, deflated and flat and uninspiring they are, because when they do an interesting sound, like, perfect example is the tic tac noise that Cyclops makes when he when he fires his tic tac eyes. It makes like a laser noise. Like I mean, it's a made up thing, so you gotta kind of have a made up sound for it. Like real lasers do not pew pew. Like so, it's fine. The noise that Gambit makes when he's like charging his cards, and it's kind of like a mystically, magically like whoa, 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 whoa. And I was like, okay, I mean, it doesn't make any sense that they would make that noise, but they want the player to know that they've taken an action, right? So I get it. And even when Storm comes in and does her cool little thing, and it's like a whistle, but it's supposed to be like a super high wind, and it's like, pew! Like that's a very 16-bitty way to make like a high pitched wind sound effect. Like I'm totally fine with that. And there's like a little crash, like the fluttering of the wind, like totally fine with that stuff. But then like when enemies die, they just kind of go like pop, and like when you get hit, you like sort of make like a flop, and like when bosses die, they're like animations at first from the danger room, so they make like a crackly noise. And like everybody who has like a shooty or a throwy thing, it goes like whoosh. Like it's just everything is just flat and uninspired and boring. Like it's just boring. Like the visuals are so supercharged, and it's the X-Men, and like the universe is interesting, and the game is got an interesting story, and all the sound effects are just like whoosh, punch, arg.
Oh no, this is happening. Yeah, actually, the specific note that I have was first of all, I have pterodactyl sound effects. Makes you want to claw your eyes out.
Yes.
And I also have, so like when you're punching, right? Why do my hands make farting sound effects?
Yeah, they do. They kind of like flop, 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 flop.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, am I punching that hard?
Wait, no. Here, I'm gonna explain this. So, you're hear me out. George, just hear me out.
You two follow me on this one.
You're in the jungle. It's hot. You're sweaty. It's action, right? You're tense because your life is on the line, and you're wearing spandex. So every time you throw a punch, it's making like the armpit fart noise, like kids used to do, like in elementary school, and maybe later if they weren't very cool, or earlier if they were way cool. So it's like a from like your spandex like pulling tight against your muscular delts. Yeah. Are you happier knowing?
No. Never want to know. But to be fair, I did ask.
Yeah, you
ask.
did.
So I mean, you can't. You can't start trying to mine demon energy and then get upset when some demons show up. But all this is true. Yeah. So no, all of them. And I think that may be why the pterodactyl sound, and I think there are a couple of other sound effects that make similar ones to that, was so offensive, was because everything else is just that kind of flat, disinteresting, like blurb, flurb, nerb, screech. And you're like, God, what? Why? And it would just, and something you have like no control over. So, I mean, honestly, if somebody said like, hey man, we're going to make this great game and you got these awesome mutant powers and that's kind of like the whole shtick, and when you use them, that makes this terrible noise. I'm like, oh, well, it's just a desaturated platformer because I'm never going to use that power. But I had no control over it. And that got so frustrating. And honestly, like as worked up as I am about the sound, like I don't really have that many notes on it because it was just all so, it was either horribly like shrill and piercingly awful, or just the most lackluster of like meh. So I mean, it's like I don't even have that many notes on it. The sound is that bad that like it screwed me twice because I hated it when I listened to it. Now I can't even hate on it properly during the podcast. Damn you, sound.
Well, and this was like most of my thoughts were just I'm genuinely shocked for how unimpressive the sound effects are, and part of me is like grasping for straws. Like, well, is it because they were trying to keep the sound effects out of the instrument range of the music so that the sound effects and the music could be happening at the same time? Or did they honestly feel like these were the right ways for these things to sound? Like, I don't want to attribute malice where we only have deaf sound engineers will do, but like, I don't know how some of these decisions got made. Like when one of the bonus X-Men that you can call in to help you was it Archangel? Yeah. And he shoots his little angel wing tip thingies, and it's like super useful. And he comes flying in, and it goes whoop, whoop, whoop. And it's like that, that noise really does not do justice to how useful and important that thing was. And then like when you call Rogue, it's almost like a little musical cue. It's like, I'm like, is that the noise she makes? Like, is that her?
But specifically with her mouth, like she just comes in, she's like, "Buanana," and like,
no, see, I prefer to think that that's like the sound she makes when she flies. Like the sound of her flying is like, it's not sonic booms like behind a jet craft. It's just like, "Buanana, buanana, buanana, buanana." And you're like, that's like how the villains know, like, Rogue is coming. Buanana, buanana, buanana. It's just the choices are just even like when Wolverine's claws pop out. I don't know how I would make the snicked noise using the Sega Genesis hardware. What they chose is not what I probably would have chosen. And I'm not saying I could have done better. I'm saying I don't know that I would have chosen like pop or like, the totally disinteresting noise that it makes. Like, it's just, everything is just bland and boring. Like, Cyclops' little eye tic tacs are okay. I kind of like Gambit's noise. Gambit, to be fair, when I was a kid, he was my favorite, so I'm like a little partial to him.
Gambit was also my favorite.
High five. But whoop-ha. But Nightcrawler's noise, like when he bamfs, which to be fair is super different than like the way it's displayed in the cartoon or the comics, because it has to be. You need to know where the character is. But right. It makes like a cool like wah 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 kind of noise. And I'm like, yeah, all right, that's like it's like a wah wah noise. Like, I get it. I'm invincible. God, everything else, every other noise is just, even when you are fighting the bosses, which we'll talk about that. But when you're fighting the bosses and you hurt them, the a boss took damage noise is ba-dink. I was just like, really? Yes. Like, that's the noise the Juggernaut makes as my adamantium claws tear through his flesh is ba-dink? Like, it just, I
think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, which is the sounds and to a degree the visuals are antithetical to the game feel, So, which is, and I think bosses are a good example of it, and a good transition into some of the mechanical stuff that I have some problems with. Is like, so when I was fighting the Juggernaut, I was like just swinging wild on him, and I had no idea if I was hurting him. It took me a couple of seconds, maybe even a minute, to look and go, oh, he has a life bar. It's just at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, and it looks almost like a part of the environment. And the thing is, it's a life bar in that it has like little tick marks, but like when he loses life, it doesn't show the absence of life. Those tick marks just cease to exist. So since I had been dealing him damage, it was actually becoming harder for me to notice that I was dealing him damage because his life bar was actually visually smaller. And so all of that happened. And just the fact that, this sound effect is also so lackluster that it doesn't make you feel like you're doing any damage. When you summon Archangel in order for literally to have an Archangel smite your enemies, it's like, nerp. Oh, okay. All right. And so it just, they don't work well together. They don't do a great job mechanically showing you like anything that is going on. Like, they don't do a good job conveying information, and they don't do a good job selling the feel of the game. They don't do the worst job. I think we have definitely seen worse, but I've seen it done way better.
Yeah, and we'll we'll circle back on this when we do our wrap up. But like I was the sound, the visuals. I was like, well, I mean, it's an old game. Like it's dated. Okay, I'm gonna give him like a little bit of a pass. The sound, the music was all right. Like it was kind of neither here nor there. The sound effects really took the wind out of me in a shocking way. Like they brought my overall enjoyment down a lot. Like
Yes.
when you're in high school or college and it's like, oh crap, I have an A paper. I'm gonna hand it in, but I can only get a B because it's 2 days late, right? Or like or worse, it's like I have a C plus paper and I'm going to hand it in, but it's 2 days late, so the best I can do is like a D plus, right? It's just like the sound effects, no matter how well a level's designed, no matter how interesting some of the mechanics are, no matter how visually pretty it is, just every time anything makes a noise, it's either uninspiring to the point of inducing like anger and frustration, or it's like eardrum piercing to the point of inducing anger and frustration. And to have both of those things so side by side, like you are so meh, I'm mad at you, and you are so annoying, I'm mad at you, is it's like bizarre. Like it didn't make me want to not play the game, but I was like, man, I'm like defeated. Like I'm really frustrated that this is my critique of the sound, is that the sound just pisses me off.
Yeah, the sound makes me angry. But speaking of bosses, I did really to go into mechanics. I thought that all the bosses were pretty even-handed and fair in the way that they interacted with the player, and I thought that there was a very nice build over time with how they became more difficult. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so we obviously played different games. I'm now realizing because my problem with the bosses is that I obviously played on amateur. I assume you played on amateur,
Yes.
which I love that. I love that little dig. Right, it's not easy mode; it's amateur mode. It's like screw you, man. Like I'm just here for a good time. You don't have to be a dick about it. So, so you know, I'm playing on amateur. It makes the levels far more reasonable in terms of difficulty. We didn't even talk about the hitbox, which is shocking, but we're about to get to it. So you make it through the level, and like my first couple times, I was like, all right, I'm struggling a little bit, but I'm getting a feel for the controls and interacting with the enemies and stuff, and I'm like, I see their patterns, and I'm like, okay. And so like by my penultimate and ultimate play session, I was like knocking down Navi like left and right. Like there were just no match for me, which was cool, right? Because you feel like a superhero,
Like the actual Navi.
yeah. Like I mean, they did not put up much of a fight, so like you know. Actually, they put up way too much of a fight, but in like the 11th hour, it was weird. It was like, why'd you wait to bring out these hardcore warriors? Anyway, so so like I'm like marching through the level. I'm like cyclopsing people all over the place with my tic tacs and snicked you know, MFers, and like I'm feeling pretty good about life. And then like you get to Juggernaut, and I had a similar experience to yours in like I don't think I'm dealing him any damage, but it's because I wasn't dealing him any damage. And I have to the moment of this recording not fully understood what actions did and did not inflict damage on a boss other than the bonus X-Men. Because
Right. That was okay. No, I'm glad it wasn't just me, because that was that was the only way I was able to beat him. Was I just kept, nothing I was doing was working. He was just wrecking me, you know. And so I was just kind of like, oh, okay, well, time to call in the A team. And so yeah, I think I called in Storm and then Archangel, and that was enough to lay him out. And unfortunately, then that taught me a lesson that I don't think the game was trying to teach me, which was always save all of those X-Men until the very end,
Yep.
which makes the game decide. So one of the things that I've done some reading on that I think is very interesting is that, or it was a quote that that people have shown to be true time and time again, which is players will optimize the fun out of your game if you let them.
yes,
You know?
yes, we will.
And yeah, because we want to, you know, beat the game and, you know, like be like, oh, we're smart and clever. It's like, yeah, but you know, you made it not fun, right? You took fun and you made it unfun. So like this was a great example of that. Was the minute that happened, I said, okay, only use these people at the very end against bosses. And that makes the bosses decidedly less fun. It makes the game as a whole decidedly less fun. And I did it every time because that's the way you play.
Yeah. And the thing that irritated me about the bosses on the regular X-Men's attacks is Wolverine claws out Slashy Downy seem to do damage against bosses, but some of the bosses are not playing that game, and when you Slashy Downy, there's a good chance they're going to knock you out of the air and just eat your lunch.
Right.
Gambit's cards sometimes did damage, but I was not able to determine what the difference between when they did and didn't do damage was. And then similar with Cyclops' face, sometimes his face did damage, sometimes it did not. And Nightcrawler, I didn't even attempt. I don't think him turning invincible does damage to the enemy ever, so I didn't even attempt that. Right. But like this was, my experience was like exactly like yours. Okay, I can't use any of my cool superpowers anywhere in the level. I have to wait till I'm at the boss, because if I miss with Archangel, or I miss with, well, Storm can't really miss, but if I miss with Archangel, if, you know, Storm only does a little bit less damage than Archangel can, because you potentially have 3 hits. And if I miss with Rogue, because Rogue always misses, then all I have left is to stand in a corner as Gambit and just be like, card.
Hey, buddy, you have Iceman. You wanna call Iceman?
No. Why don't you just go sit over there in the corner?
Okay.
Go make yourself an ice chair and face the corner.
So I definitely think that was a huge issue, was just, you know, maximizing the fun out of it. One of the things so I'm a big proponent of, especially the more that we've played these games, a proponent of mechanical easy modes, right? So where you can basically be clever in finding like a way to cheat the system, and then if you want the game to be harder, you just naturally don't do that one, you know? Because that's not like because it's the opposite kind of maximizing the fun out of the game, where it's just kind of like, if you do this, right, then you make the game super easy, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, now I choose to play the game how I want to play it, which is something that I think is good. I thought they had a missed opportunity here, because Wolverine doesn't heal, right? And okay, so first,
Wolverine heals. This imposter.
So maybe actually Wolverine's not a playable character. Morph is.
Yeah. It's just Mystique. That's the end of the game. You find out she was working for Magneto the whole time.
I mean, dude, the headcanon accepted. Now whenever somebody's like, oh man, Wolverine was my favorite character, Wolverine wasn't in that game. Mystique was. But no, so Wolverine doesn't heal, which, by the way, it's irresponsible, attention to source media like this, which is why for a few years as a kid, I thought Wolverine's superpower was his claws, and that he did not have a healing factor. It wasn't until like later where I was like, oh man, I was super wrong about that. And more importantly is I was super sure I was right, which means I made some other 12-year-olds feel really bad about themselves when I was in fact wrong. But it's fine. I'm sure it's good. But with all of that being said, is that if the reason why he doesn't heal is because your mutant energy regenerates over time, right? And so and your health doesn't. So he would therefore be the only person that actually has nearer to like infinite health kind of a thing, you know? And at first I was like, well, that's why they did it, because playing that character would be so much easier. And then I was like, and that's why they should have, you know? Because then it would be like, you know, because it would just be a thing where it's like, what do you want to do? Well, I just want to get through this game. Like, I want to go punch Apocalypse in his dumb face. It's like, then play as Wolverine. Wolverine regenerates health, and makes the game way easier, even on like amateur mode, right? And it's like, and if you want a challenge, play as any of the other X-Men, because God knows on the playground you're not gonna get any playground points, any clout for saying, yeah, I beat the X-Men video game with self-healing Wolverine. People are gonna be like, go sit in the corner if you would. Just
go make a nice chair. So that we've been complaining about this game a lot, and it deserves it. But there's an interesting thing they did that I think dovetails really closely to what you're describing, which is at any time in any level you can change between Gambit, Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and Cyclops. And you can just literally open it's essentially the pause menu. You can pause the game, switch to one of the other X-Men, and then for some reason there's an additional button you have to push because God forbid that was only one step. And they make you into, the other one, the one you are bamfs out and you appear as the other one. And that's cool because Cyclops can jump weirdly high and Wolverine can also jump weirdly high, but only if you mash the controller in a certain way. And Nightcrawler is a slightly smaller target because when he ducks, he's kind of sideways because of the way he kicks. And Gambit also does a weird screw attack when he jumps. I don't know. I didn't understand that. And Cyclops makes a weird noise. Anyway, I thought it was a very cool opportunity to be oh, okay. There's going to be times when I need to use Cyclops Tic Tac Face, or I need to use Gambit's cards to hit something at a distance that's at a weird angle, or I'm going to have to bamf through a wall as Nightcrawler. And the amount of times they draw on that is once in the first 3 levels, literally once. And then every other time it doesn't matter who you are and you just get to pick. And the reason that I think they had to design the levels that way is because you have 0 lives. If you die as Cyclops, Cyclops is out. If you die as Wolverine, right, Wolverine is out. And the way they essentially bake in the life system is once you die as all 4 X-Men, the game is over. And that's a dumb way to do it. It's a really dumb way to bake in the live system. And I understand thematically it works because it's yes, all of the X-Men have been defeated, stupid. So now everybody's done. But it's it makes the game less interesting because they're all interchangeable inside of the levels. They should have made the levels rely on swapping your X-Men in and out. Oh, there's a thing over there that is only activated when Cyclops throws Tic Tacs at it. Oh, there's a thing over here that can only be destroyed by Wolverine. There's a thing over here that can't be destroyed by anybody, and you have to bam through it as Nightcrawler. The level design could have been so much more interesting, but instead, it's confusing platformers where you can never tell what friggin' plane of existence you're in. And once everybody dies, then you're just done, and Magneto's smug 16-bit face, which is very thoughtfully rendered, comes on to tell you that you suck.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think that I think that you make a very good point, which is to say that what they kind of thought their core engagement is not really engaging, which is because they were oh yeah, you're gonna jump on platforms and punch people in the face. It's gonna be fun. It's yeah, and I mean it's not, but But what could have been fun would have been a very interesting, basically X-Men themed puzzle game that also has punching some people in the face, right? One of the other things that, so yeah, like you said, it's something that could have been a lot of fun, but instead, all the characters are interchangeable, and so you might as well just stay as Cyclops until he is on death's door. It would have just been just as easy to have given each character 4 times the life and have them share a pool of life,
Totally.
Similar to that is one of the things that they did do that I thought was actually a choice in the right direction was the fact that your mutant power regenerates is a good idea. I do not feel that it regenerates fast enough. Because I went out of with Wolverine's claws, let's take for example, right? 80% of the time I did not use them because I was super afraid that I was going to need them, and you don't your mutant powers, though it does regenerate, which is a good, again, that is the right decision. Your mutant power should regenerate, but it regenerates so slowly that I was just worried that I'd get 3/4 of the way through the level and be oh, I need all of this mutant power all of a sudden. And Wolverine's claws, Cyclops' eyes, Gambit's cards, none of them are so powerful, in my opinion, that if you spam them constantly, it's game breaking. You know?
It's, what it is somebody when the design team went into the room and they wrote up on the whiteboard, they were like, okay, we can't have people just spamming their superpowers because that would be boring, right? This is why it's been impossible to make a good Superman video game, because he is too powerful and there would be no challenge and it would be boring. So they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're either going to have the powers be really good but regenerate slowly so you don't want to waste them, or we'll have the powers not be too powerful so that even if you kind of abuse them, it doesn't really make the game like too super easy. And then those people got called into another meeting, and somebody, like one of the programmers, came into the room and just saw slow regeneration, weak powers, and was like, okay. And that's what they shipped, was like 2 solutions to the same problem, which means they massively overcorrected.
Yes. And unfortunately, you touched on the Superman video game I want to make, so strap in. But it does call back to this, which is, so like you said, is that one of the reasons why, in our opinion, they've never really made a good Superman game is because Superman is basically a god, and like, so they're like, oh well, his powers have to have a limit. It's like his powers don't have a limit, though. So how could you possibly create a game where like you have an infinite amount of power and it doesn't like go anywhere? It's not lost. And the thing is that that's the point and the challenge of Superman is not whether or not he has enough powers to like punch his way through it. It's how many people would get hurt if he did. So like, for example, in the Superman game I would want to make, right, is you'd have like, let's just say 5 objectives, right? And you can use your supersonic flight as much as you want, but if you push your supersonic flight too much, you'll blow the windows out of like, all of the buildings, and that will upset people, right? And you can move as fast as you can, but then, because your character's avatar is moving super fast, if you run into somebody while you're moving at super speed, you'll hurt them, and that will upset people, right? So on and so forth, because you're a big, terrifying alien. So with all that being said, that to me is the answer to the mechanical problem that you're describing, right? Is if magic does in a hard magic system, it is not always the limitations and costs. You don't always need both. You can use one or the other, and the limitation can be your character's like lack of desire to, like be a horrifying monster. Like set up situations like have Cyclops uses heat vision all the time, but then set up off the top, like, thing, set up the red explodey barrels, make that a mechanic, red explodey barrels, right? So that way you just can't go around spamming it all the time, because you'll eventually get careless and blow up something that you shouldn't blow up,
right? Yeah, or make like with Nightcrawler, when he's invincible, he's kind of, because he's supposed to be bamfing, he's just like flying all over the screen. So make it like kind of cumbersome to choose where I bamf back out, so that I can't then, while I'm doing intricate platforming, I'm not going to turn invincible, because then I might bamf over a pit and die, right? Like there's, and like with Wolverine, like that one writes itself, because he has the claws and he's more powerful, and that's awesome, but it's still not like a range weapon. It's not like it just kills everything in an area of effect. So like, he can and should be able to have his claws out all the time, and it just means he hits harder than anyone else, which they already compensated for by giving him the worst reach, because Gambit has his staff, Nightcrawler kicks a lot, and Cyclops is a giant who occupies 80% of the screen, and I loved it because every time he threw a punch, he threw like the worst drunken brawler haymaker, where he's leaned way the hell over at the waist, but it means you can punch people on the other side of the level. Like, it's friggin' awesome. Yes. And the way they compensated for that with Wolverine is he is not a giant, which is actually canon accurate. He's not a giant. So it's like, oh, now he has his claws out, so he does way more damage, but you still kind of have to be close to your opponent. Like,
well, and everything you just described would have been really nice and synergistic to the other thing that you mentioned, which I agree with completely, is all of that would have made for way more interesting puzzles, right? Because then what you do is you could create an intricate platforming section, and so like section, and that is also kind of good, because it's like, okay, well, the thing, it isn't always necessarily that one character is the correct answer. It's that there's one character that is clearly the wrong answer, right?
It's
So like you said, like,
you got like a multiple choice thing, right? There's the character that has the obvious superpowered way to solve this problem. There's the character that is so obviously not the right one to solve this problem. And then there's the other two who like could solve it, but you're going to have to get creative in how you do it if you use them. So it's like you've got your obvious right answer, your obvious wrong answer, and then you're like, well, these are valuable distractors. One of these could be the right answer.
right. And so, yeah, exactly. And so, and then that would even help with if they didn't pool health, right? Then let's say that you still wanted to do each person has their own bar. You'd have to get rid of the permadeath thing and I don't really like that anyways, but
that's
just because
that's one of those things that is very endemic of older video games. And I know we've brought it up before, and I try not to because that was just a thing of the time. All old games were like, yeah, you get 3 strikes and you're out. That's how games work. And it's like, no, but you're inventing the universe. They don't have to work that way. Nope, 3 strikes and you're out. And it's like, and I mean, we did learn that lesson eventually, but that's one of those things that I feel like no one was making that decision consciously. Everyone was just like, yeah, in video games, if you die 3 times, you have to start from the beginning. And it was just a lesson that took us a long time to beat out.
Yeah, and that's fine. But then if you did it where, there was a clear right answer, a clear wrong answer, and then, but not an impossible one, just a clear suboptimal one, and then like 2 like meh, then yeah, if you've lost one of the characters, then it just, you lost the best one for the answer. Sucks. You still have other options. You only have the worst one, still possible, but just really hard, and that would have been interesting, because especially if you were like, because then that would actually also do something which is generally considered to be a good thing, which is generating choice by placing in-game mechanics against out-of-game desire, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, Call of Duty accomplishes this because the fastest, most efficient, and direct path is usually the most dangerous, right? So that's how they create this kind of like challenge, right? But that would have been interesting because everybody's got their favorite X-Men, so you want to play as that X-Men all the time. But if you do, then chances are they're going to die, and then you won't have that thing to solve the puzzle later. So it'll force you to get some of the difference in kind by saying you're like, oh, well, that's fine. Dude, play as Wolverine. Play as Wolverine all the time. It's totally cool. You're going to be screwed, though, if you let him die and when you get to some of these sections, or even if you let him get to really low health. And then you have to go into these sections. So it's like, so be careful. You may want to, just like a good manager, like let everybody on the team take a shot,
And this is, I'm glad you mentioned the favorite X-Men thing because this was one of those things that I found a little shocking at first. And then I compared my, 9-year-old self to my 32-year-old self, and it made total sense, which is when I played this game as a kid, I am positive that even though Gambit was my favorite X-Men, X person, I still preferred Nightcrawler in the game because Nightcrawler could teleport and be invincible while he was doing it. And that stuck with me as a mechanic that I recognized as a young kid as being really useful, right? And I'd like to believe I'm a little bit better at picking things apart in their design capacities now than I was then. And when I was first playing, I was like, man, Nightcrawler, okay, I like his kicky thing. He like kicks down at an angle if you attack while you're jumping. And when he ducks, he has kind of a long reach because he like puts his hand down and kicks out. It's like, that's kind of cool. But then I started playing as Cyclops and I was like, wait a minute. In the second level, when you have all these jerks with like big rifles, when you duck, you are underneath their ability to shoot you. And they will stand perfectly still and fire over your head for all of time. And if you tic-tac them in the knees, they die. And the tic-tac, surprisingly, does not use as much of your mutant power bar as every other power in the game, which is weird. So on Amateur, most of the enemies can be beaten with 1 or 2 shots of a mutant power. So the once I realized that, going through the spaceship level, I was like, oh, every time an enemy's on screen, I just drop to my knees and reduce them to vapor from the knees up, like, which was kind of empowering. I was like, oh, like now I'm Cyclops, like I'm this super powered psychopath with laser tic-tac face and, marching around the ship. And then the game found a way to completely deflate my balloon, which is, you like fly in between the 2 space stations, and you you have to go out onto the little platform to get onto the shuttle that flies between the two parts of the space station. And when the platform reaches the end of its extending animation, it vanishes in one frame. Yeah. So I'm standing, Cyclops, because he's a freaking giant. He's so much bigger than everybody else. So I'm standing on the platform, and I'm like, because I've now played this level a few times, and it's like extending me out toward the ship. And I'm like, yeah, I've got my knee blowing out technique down. I'm coming for you guys. I know that the stupid little asteroids perfectly alternate, so I have to keep going between the top and bottom level of the spacecraft. I've got this figured out. And then the platform just evaporates under my feet, and I plummet to my death. And I was just like, because the game had just let me get to a point where I was like, I had to memorize these things. I define this kind of video gamey mechanic to let me beat their super simple AI, but I'm feeling good. I'm a powerful mutant. And it just couldn't let me have it. Like, it just couldn't let me be happy.
Because unfortunately, the game, I think, kind of falls into one of the problems that we've seen in a number of different games, and is not uncommon, which is it is very easy to create a game that beats players. It is difficult to create a game that helps you beat it, And this one seems to focus on the former, where they're like, oh yeah, and then at every iteration of playtesting, whenever somebody just breezed through an area, they're like, well, how can we make it harder? How can we make it more engaging? How can we make it more challenging? How can we make it more interesting? We make it harder. It's like, what? The platform just disappeared without warning. It's like, yes, incentivize that employee.
So, all right, before we talk about whether or not it held up, I want to have almost like a preamble conversation, which is, this is where I turn my chair around and I turn to the camera, and I've got my suit jacket over my shoulder, and I'm like, we've had a lot of fun here today. But we've played some games we loved. We've played some games we were indifferent towards. We've played some games we hated. And I want to be clear, I actually did not hate this game except for one design choice. Everything else I was able to nostalgia goggles my way around. Getting to the very, very end of a level, because every level has multiple boss fights. So getting to the very end of a level and dying, and now that X-Man is out of my roster. I do not have full health with my other X-Mans, and I'm now back at the very beginning of the level. That was untenable to me. And it's punishing. And a big part of that is that I'm not a child on summer vacation with unlimited time to play video games. And I might have completely overlooked it if that was my situation, but I don't think I should have to. That is a mechanic that I was like, nope, this far, no farther. I cannot. After like the fourth or fifth time I died on Apocalypse and I had to walk through that entire level again, I was just like, no, I'm not doing this. Like, if you can't give me checkpoints or restart me at a boss if I made it to the boss or something, and I'm now down an X-Men, my powers aren't restored, my health isn't restored, like, you're giving me nothing to compensate me. Like, right. I have no insurance, I have nothing to show for my hard work. And that to me was just an arcade mechanic. Like, they're trying to get quarters out of me because I'm going to lose all my X-Men, and then they're going to go continue, but this is a console game, so It doesn't do that, and it just throws you back to the title screen. And so the reason I say all that is something we've never really, I think, unpacked completely, but that this game, more than a lot of the games we've played, kind of put this idea in my head is, I don't blame this game for its horrible design decisions, because at the time, they probably were not horrible. They were probably industry standard to maybe even good. Like being able to switch character in the level and like try, like do things that were dependent on their powers and interact with the world in a slightly different way, depending on the X-Men you were at any point, as long as they weren't dead. Like that's pretty interesting, right? And like having slightly different reach and slightly different walk, and you're a slightly different size target, like those were all interesting mechanics. And the level design isn't super inspired, but it's pretty bog standard. Like, that's fine. The sound effects are a total train wreck, and I don't forgive them for that. But what this game made me realize as I was playing it, and what this conversation has absolutely cemented in my mind, is I want someone in the industry or some talented ROM hacker or someone to like go back and find these games. They could just listen to the show, maybe find these games and remake them. Yes, remake them, fixing these design. Let's not say fixing, making more modern and more informed design choices, because this game, as frustrating as it was, I actually kind of enjoyed it. Other than the punishing level death thing, I was kind of like, I'm sort of enjoying figuring this out, and like, where can I cheat the AI and which powers do I need to, like, the mechanics were okay. And I was like, man, there's just so many paper cuts though. There's so many damn paper cuts. And if they weren't there, I would probably love this instead of just like struggling to tolerate it.
And I think that you're right. There's a couple of things that are like fundamentally where you're like, this is a fundamental flaw, but mostly the issue is just death by 1,000 cuts, you know? We're just like, you know, the sound in and of itself isn't that bad. You know, there's some places where it's horrible and some places where it's just lackluster, but it's fine. When you add that with, you know, the weird permadeath system, when you add that with like all these other sort of things, it kind of adds up. And so then, in my opinion, to answer the question, does it hold up? Do you need nostalgia goggles to play this?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think now. And the problem with the binary of even now we've kludged the system with saying you're like, well, there's nostalgia monocle. That's like yes, no, and maybe.
I'm proud of
not
that hack though.
Yeah, no, and it's good. It's good. But I'm just like, even with that though, it's like there have been some games where I'm like, you absolutely you need the nostalgia goggles. It does not hold up whatsoever. This game is technically a war crime, you know, and this is not that. But that being said, like, if you are thinking, you know what I should do? I should probably take a few hours sometime and go back and pick up X-Men for the Sega Genesis because, oh, dude, I love that game and I would just love to play it. No, your time is better suited doing something else. In fact, I would say specifically don't do it because just hold on to that memory. It's good. It's good memory. Don't rob yourself of that and your time by going back and playing this game. The memory is absolutely better. Let it stay there.
So my last thought on sound is, would you? This is a stupid question, but I'm genuinely kind of curious. Like, this is a point in history when we still had like pew pew noises. Like, do you think it would have bothered you less if Cyclops, if it literally went like pew?
No.
Would that have been worse? All right, and then the last question I have to ask you is, because you said Gambit was your favorite X-Men, who did you play in this? Were you Gambit just because he was your favorite? Because we never actually addressed that, and that is shocking to me.
Yes, Gambit was my favorite X-Men, but I don't know why. I got into a really good groove with a giant Cyclops,
right.
The Manslayer.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. He was 100% my go-to, and I would actually switch from other X-Men back to him to restore his life more so that I could use him again sooner. Yes, no,
his real superpower is apparently being blessed with gigantism and laser vision. But
pew 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 pew.
No place to hide, no place to run, no place to run. The mutant age has now